The wagon rattled to a stop at the edge of nowhere. Clara Vance climbed down, her boots hitting dust that hadn't seen rain in months. The driver didn't wait, didn't even look at her, just clicked his tongue, turned the horses, and left her standing there with a canvas bag and nothing else. She watched the wagon disappear into the heat shimmer, then turned to face the ranch. It wasn't much. Weathered fence posts, a barn that leaned like it was tired of standing. The house was small, functional, built by someone who didn't care about comfort. Mountains rose in the distance, indifferent and massive. The land stretched flat and brutal in every direction, baking under a sun that felt personal. Clara adjusted the bag on her shoulder. Her dress was torn at the hem, dusty from 3 days of travel. Her hands were calloused, nails broken. She was 26 and looked older. The kind of older that comes from disappointment, not years. She walked toward the house. The door opened before she reached it. A man stepped out and Clara stopped. He was tall, taller than anyone she'd worked for. Broad through the shoulders, lean everywhere else. His shirt was faded gray, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Dark hair, too long. A face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so closed off. He didn't smile, didn't frown. Just looked at her with eyes that gave nothing away. "Clara Vance?" His voice was low, flat. "That's right." He nodded once. "Rowan Hale, you're late." Stage broke an axle outside Millerton. Took 2 days to fix. Don't care about the reason. Just stating fact. He stepped off the porch, moving past her toward the barn. "You know what you're here for? Work." "Work doesn't cover it." He stopped, glanced back. "You'll be up before dawn. You'll feed livestock, mend fence, haul water, chop wood, muck stalls. You'll do whatever needs doing until it's done. No days off. No complaints. Meals are plain, bed's a cot in the back room, no pay." Clara's jaw tightened. "I know the terms." "Then why are you here?" It was the first real question he'd asked, and Clara felt the weight of it. She met his eyes. "Because no one else would take me." Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he turned and kept walking. "Barn's this way. I'll show you what needs doing today." Clara followed. The barn was dim and smelled like hay and horses. 3 stalls, 2 occupied. Rowan grabbed a pitchfork, handed it to her. "Start with mucking. When you're done, there's fence wire in the corner that needs untangling. After that, check the water trough. It's leaking. I'll be in the north pasture until sundown." "That's it? You want me to hold your hand?" "No." "Good." He walked toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Don't go into town. Don't talk to anyone who comes by. Keep your head down and do the work. That's the deal." "Why?" He turned, and for a second something flickered in his expression, something dark. "Because the people in that town would rather see you dead than see you here, and I don't need the trouble." Then he was gone. Clara stood alone in the barn, gripping the pitchfork. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from anger. She'd heard versions of this speech before. Different words, same message. You're not wanted. You're not worth the risk. She stabbed the pitchfork into the nearest pile of manure and got to work. The first week was hell. Clara woke every morning in darkness, her body screaming from the day before. The cot was thin, the room was cold, and sleep was something that happened in pieces. She'd haul herself up, pull on the same worn clothes, and start the day before the sun even thought about rising, feeding the horses, mucking the stalls, hauling buckets of water from the well to the trough, splitting firewood until her shoulders burned, mending fence posts with wire that bit into her palms. Rowan didn't help, didn't offer advice, didn't check on her. He worked his own section of the ranch, always moving, always distant. She'd see him on horseback in the far pasture or bent over some broken piece of equipment near the shed. He never came close. Meals were silent. Breakfast was oats, sometimes eggs. Dinner was stew or beans, bread if there was time. They ate at opposite ends of a small wooden table, and the only sounds were forks scraping plates. Clara tried talking once, asked him about the ranch, how long he'd been here. He answered with one word, long. Then stood up and left. She stopped trying after that, but she kept working, because the alternative was going back to a town that had made it clear she was nothing. A town where whispers followed her like smoke, where doors closed before she could knock, where even the church had turned her away with polite, poisonous smiles. We can't help someone like you. You understand. She understood perfectly. So she hauled water until her arms felt like they'd fall off. She mended wire until her hands bled. She mucked stalls and chopped wood and did every miserable task Rowan threw at her, because this ranch, this cold, silent, back-breaking place, was the only thing standing between her and nothing. 2 weeks in, the first visitor came. Clara was by the water trough, hammering a patch over the leak. The sun was high, brutal. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She didn't hear the rider until he was close. Well, well, look at this. She turned. The man on the horse was young, maybe 30, with a clean suit and a smirk that made her stomach twist. He sat easy in the saddle, like he owned the world. Behind him, 2 more riders, both watching her with the kind of interest that had nothing good in it. Clara straightened, hammer still in her hand. The man tipped his hat mockingly. You must be the new help. Heard Hale picked up a stray. His eyes traveled over her slowly, deliberately. Gotta say, wasn't expecting much. But you're interesting. I'm working. You need something? Need something? He laughed. Sweetheart, I'm here as a courtesy. Name's Daniel Pritchard. My father owns half the land around here. Hale's got the other half, for now. He leaned forward in the saddle. See, people in town are talking. They're saying Rowan's harboring trash, that maybe he's lost his mind out here. And my father? He's concerned. Concerned about what? About the kind of woman who shows up at a man's ranch with no references, no reputation, and no shame. His smile widened. You know what people are saying about you, don't you? About where you came from? Clara's grip tightened on the hammer. I don't care what people say. You should, because if you stay here, you'll drag Hale down with you. Man's already got a reputation. Doesn't need yours making it worse. Then why are you here? If it's such a problem, why not tell him yourself? Pritchard's smile faded. Maybe I will, or maybe I'm giving you a chance to leave on your own before things get ugly. Things are already ugly. Not yet, sweetheart. Not yet. He pulled the reins, turning his horse. The other 2 riders followed. As they left, Pritchard called back over his shoulder. Think about it, Miss Vance. Think real hard. Clara stood there, hammer in hand, watching them disappear. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She didn't move until they were gone. Then she went back to work. That night, Rowan came into the house later than usual. Clara had already made dinner, beans, bread, water. She set a plate in front of him and sat down across the table. He ate in silence. Clara waited until he was halfway through. Someone came by today. Rowan didn't look up. Who? Daniel Pritchard and 2 others. Now he looked up. His eyes were sharp, focused. What did he want? To tell me I don't belong here, that I'm dragging you down. Clara paused. He said his father's concerned. His father? Rowan's voice was flat, but something hard moved underneath it. Charles Pritchard owns the bank, half the businesses in town, thinks he owns the people too. He said you've got a reputation. Everyone's got a reputation out here. Rowan pushed his plate away. What did you tell him? Nothing. Told him I was working. He left. Rowan leaned back in his chair, studying her. You scared? Clara met his eyes. No. You should be. Pritchards don't make threats they don't mean. Neither do I. For the first time since she'd arrived, Rowan almost smiled. It wasn't warm, wasn't friendly, but it was something. You planning to leave? He asked. No. Good. He stood, grabbed his hat. Then we keep working, and if Pritchard or anyone else comes back, you tell me. Immediately. Why? Because I don't let people push me around on my own land, and I sure as hell don't let them push around the people who work for me. He walked out into the night, leaving Clara alone at the table. She stared at the empty doorway, something shifting in her chest. It wasn't gratitude. It was something harder, sharper. It was the first time in years someone had stood beside her instead of pointing fingers. Contempt. The work got harder. Rowan pushed her, not cruelly, but relentlessly. More fence to mend, more wood to split. He started teaching her things. How to handle the horses properly, how to fix a bridle, how to read the land for water. He didn't explain why, just showed her once and expected her to remember. Clara learned fast. She had to. because the visits didn't stop. 3 days after Pritchard, a woman came by, middle-aged, dressed like money. She stood on the porch and called for Rowan. When Clara answered the door, the woman's face twisted. "Tell Mr. Hale that the Ladies' Charitable Society is concerned about the moral state of this ranch. We're prepared to offer assistance if he's willing to make changes." "What kind of changes?" Clara asked. The woman's smile was ice. "The kind that don't involve women like you." Clara shut the door in her face. A week later, 2 men from town rode up while Rowan was out. They didn't dismount, just sat on their horses and stared. When Clara ignored them and kept working, one spat on the ground near her feet. "Whore." She didn't react, didn't flinch. They left, but the word hung in the air like smoke. That night, Rowan asked her what happened. Clara told him. He didn't say anything, just nodded. But the next morning, he rode into town. Clara didn't ask what he did. But when he came back hours later, his knuckles were bruised. No one came by for 2 weeks after that. A month into her time at the ranch, Clara started to understand Rowan. Not through words, he barely spoke, but through the way he worked, the way he moved through the world like someone who expected nothing and demanded less. He was careful with the animals, rough with the tools. He never wasted time, never sat idle. And he never, ever looked comfortable. She started noticing other things too. The way he flinched when thunder cracked in the distance. The way he avoided the town road, even when it was faster. The way he stared at the mountains sometimes, like he was seeing something she couldn't. One night she found him outside the barn, standing in the dark, just standing. She almost turned back, but something stopped her. "You all right?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn around. "Fine." "You don't look fine." "What do you want, Clara?" She hesitated. "Nothing, just checking." He finally looked at her. The moonlight caught his face, and she saw exhaustion there. Deep, bone-tired exhaustion that had nothing to do with the work. "You don't need to check on me," he said. "Maybe not, but I am." They stood there in silence. Wind moved through the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Rowan exhaled slowly. "I don't sleep much." "Neither do I." "Why not?" Clara shrugged. "Bad dreams, bad memories, take your pick." "Same." Another silence. This one felt different, less hostile, almost companionable. "You ever think about leaving?" Clara asked. "Every day?" "But you don't." "No." "Why?" Rowan turned back toward the mountains. "Because I don't have anywhere else to go." Clara understood that more than she wanted to. Mercant. 6 weeks in, the town sent a sheriff. He arrived midday, alone, riding a tired-looking horse. He was older, gray-bearded, with eyes that had seen too much. He dismounted slowly, like his back hurt. Clara was hauling water when he approached. She set the bucket down. "You Clara Vance?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." "Sheriff Tom Brennan. Need a word with Rowan Hale. He's out working." "Then I'll wait." The sheriff sat on the porch steps. Clara stood near the well, arms crossed. They didn't speak. Rowan rode up 20 minutes later. He dismounted, saw the sheriff, and his whole body tensed. "Tom." "Rowan." "What brings you out here?" The sheriff stood, brushing dust off his pants. "Town council sent me. They got complaints." "About?" "About her." The sheriff nodded toward Clara. "Folks are saying you're harboring someone with no proper documentation, no work history, no references, that maybe she's undesirable." "Undesirable," Rowan repeated flatly. Their words, not mine. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, just doing my job. They want me to verify she's here legally, that you've got a proper employment arrangement. She's working for room and board, that legal enough for you?" "It's complicated. There's talk of ordinances, vagrancy laws. The Pritchards are pushing for, I don't care what the Pritchards are pushing for." Rowan's voice dropped, went cold. "This is my land. She's working for me. That's the end of it." The sheriff sighed. "Rowan, I'm trying to help you here. If I just what? Throw her out? Let the town decide who I can and can't employ?" Rowan stepped closer. "You know me, Tom. You know what I've been through. You think I'm going to let Charles Pritchard and his lapdog son tell me how to run my ranch? The sheriff held up his hands. I'm not the enemy here. Then stop acting like their messenger. Silence stretched between them. Clara watched, barely breathing. Finally, the sheriff nodded. All right, I'll tell them I checked, that everything's in order. But Rowan, this won't stop. You know that, right? They'll keep pushing. Let them push. The sheriff mounted his horse, looked down at both of them. You're making enemies you don't need. Already got all the enemies I can handle, Rowan said. The sheriff rode off. Clara and Rowan stood in the yard. The sun beat down. Dust swirled. Thank you, Clara said quietly. Rowan didn't look at her. Don't thank me. This isn't over. I know. You still want to stay? Clara thought about the town, the faces that had turned away, the doors that had closed, the man who'd called her a whore, the woman who'd smiled like poison. Yes, she said, I still want to stay. Rowan nodded once. Then get back to work. She did. But something had shifted. Something small, but unmistakable. For the first time since she'd arrived, Clara felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was standing her ground. The next Sunday, Clara broke the rules. She rode into town. Rowan was out checking fence lines when she left. She saddled one of the horses, slowly, carefully, the way he'd taught her, and headed down the dusty road toward civilization. She told herself she was going for supplies, that they needed flour and salt, that it was practical. But the truth was simpler. She was done hiding. The town wasn't much. A main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a bank, wooden buildings baking in the sun. Horses tied to posts, a few people moving slowly through the heat. Clara rode straight to the general store. She tied the horse, walked inside. The bell above the door chimed. The storekeeper looked up. His smile died instantly. We don't serve your kind here, he said. Clara stopped. My kind? You know what I mean. Hale's woman. I'm not Hale's woman. I work for him, and I need flour and salt. Store's closed. Sign says open. Not for you. Clara felt heat crawl up her neck. She glanced around. 3 other customers in the store, all staring. A woman with a basket. 2 men near the back. I've got money, Clara said evenly. Don't care. Get out. The woman with the basket leaned over to the storekeeper. Is that her? The one everyone's talking about? That's her, the storekeeper said loudly. Clara Vance showed up out of nowhere. No family, no references, living alone with Rowan Hale like it's proper. The woman's face twisted in disgust. Shameful. Clara's hands clenched. She forced them to relax. I came for supplies, that's all. And I told you, we don't serve trash. The words hit like a slap, but Clara didn't move, didn't blink. Fine, she said quietly. Then I'll go somewhere else. There is nowhere else, the storekeeper said, smiling now. Every shop in this town knows about you. You're not welcome here. You never will be. Clara turned and walked out. She stood on the wooden sidewalk, breathing hard. The sun was too bright. The street was too quiet. She could feel eyes on her from every window, every doorway. She mounted the horse, and that's when she saw him, Daniel Pritchard, leaning against the post outside the saloon, watching her with that same smug smile. Didn't go well, did it? He called. Clara ignored him, started to turn the horse. You should have left when I gave you the chance, Pritchard said, louder now. People were stopping, listening. Now it's too late. Everyone knows what you are, and they're not going to let you stay. Clara pulled the reins, looked at him. What I am? And what's that exactly? A woman with no morals, no shame, shacking up with a man who's barely sane himself. Pritchard pushed off the post, walked closer. You think Rowan Hale's going to protect you? He can't even protect himself. Man's a ghost. Everyone knows it. You don't know anything about him. Ma, I know he's barely holding on to that ranch. I know my father's been trying to buy it for years. And I know that once you're gone, Rowan won't last 6 months. Pritchard smiled. So do everyone a favor. Leave before we make you. Clara stared at him. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. No. Pritchard's smile faded. What? I said no. I'm not leaving. And you can tell your father and the storekeeper and everyone else in this miserable town that I don't care what they think. I'm staying." She turned the horse and rode out of town. Behind her, she heard Pritchard laugh, but it sounded forced, angry. She made it halfway back to the ranch before the tears came. Not from fear, from rage. She pulled the horse to a stop, sat there in the middle of the empty road, and let it pour out. All the years of doors closing, all the whispers, all the smiles that weren't smiles, all the time she'd been told she wasn't good enough, wasn't clean enough, wasn't wanted. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she wiped her face, straightened her back, and rode home. Rowan was in the yard when she arrived. He looked up, saw her face, and didn't say anything, just waited. Clara dismounted. "I went into town." "I can see that." "They wouldn't serve me. Called me trash, told me to leave." Rowan's jaw tightened. "What did you do?" "I told them no." He stared at her, then nodded slowly. "Good." "Is it? Because now they're going to come after you too. Pritchard said—" "I don't care what Pritchard said." Rowan stepped closer. "You did the right thing." "Did I? Because it feels like I just made everything worse." "Maybe, but at least you didn't run." He held her gaze. "Running doesn't solve anything, believe me. I've tried." Clara felt something crack open inside her. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." "I know enough." "What does that mean?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It means I know what it's like when the world decides you're not worth keeping. And I know what it takes to survive anyway." He turned toward the barn. "Now come on, we've got work to do." Clara stood there, watching him walk away. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't feel alone. That night, something changed between them. They ate dinner in the usual silence, but it felt different, less hostile, more companionable. When Rowan finished, he didn't immediately leave. He stayed at the table, rolling a cigarette slowly. "Why'd you come here?" he asked suddenly. Clara looked up. "I told you no one else would—" "No, I mean why here? Why my ranch? There are other places, other towns." Claire set her fork down. "I heard you didn't ask questions, that you needed help and didn't care where it came from." "That's it? That's enough, isn't it?" Rowan lit the cigarette, exhaled smoke. "What did you do?" "In your old town." "I existed. Apparently that was enough to make me a problem." "There's more to it than that." Clara's eyes hardened. "There always is. But it doesn't matter. The story's already written. I'm the villain no matter what I say." "Try me." She studied him, the closed-off face, the careful distance, the man who'd stood up for her without asking for anything in return. "I was a seamstress," she said finally. "Worked for a woman who ran a dress shop. Rich clients, expensive fabrics. I was good at it." She paused. "One of the clients was a banker's wife. She accused me of stealing a brooch. Said I took it while hemming her dress." "Did you?" "No." Claire's voice was flat. "But her husband owned half the town, so it didn't matter. They arrested me. Kept me in jail for 3 days before they realized the brooch was at her house the whole time. She'd misplaced it." "They apologize?" Clara laughed bitterly. "They let me go. That was the apology. But by then, everyone knew. Everyone had already decided I was a thief. I lost my job, lost my room. No one would hire me. The church told me to leave town for my own safety." She met his eyes. "So I did. And I kept moving until I ran out of towns that would take me. Your ranch was the last stop." Rowan smoked in silence, then, "That's a raw deal." "Life's full of those." "Yeah." He stubbed out the cigarette. "It is." They sat there, two people who'd been chewed up by the world and spat out in the same place. "What about you?" Clara asked. "What's your story?" Rowan's face closed off immediately. "Doesn't matter. You asked mine." "That's different." "How?" He stood abruptly. "Because I don't talk about it. Ever." He grabbed his hat. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long." He walked out. Clara sat alone at the table, staring at the empty doorway. She didn't push, didn't follow. Some wounds were too deep to dig into. She understood that better than anyone. The attack started 3 days later. Clara woke to the sound of screaming horses. She bolted out of bed, stumbled into the yard. Smoke was rising from the barn, thick, black, choking. "Rowan!" she shouted. He was already there, running from the house with a bucket. "Get water, now!" Clara ran to the well, hauled up bucket after bucket. They threw water on the flames, working frantically. The horses were panicking inside, kicking at the stalls. Rowan grabbed Clara's arm. "Open the stalls! Get them out!" She ran inside, smoke burning her lungs. The heat was suffocating. She fumbled with the first latch, yanked it open. The horse bolted past her, nearly knocking her down. She moved to the second stall, then the third. By the time she got outside, Rowan had the fire under control. It wasn't a big blaze, just enough to terrify the animals and damage part of the structure. They stood in the yard, coughing, covered in soot. "That wasn't an accident," Clara said. "No." Rowan's voice was ice. "It wasn't." He walked to the edge of the property, staring into the darkness. Clara followed. On the fence post, someone had nailed a piece of paper. Rowan tore it down, read it, then crumpled it in his fist. "What does it say?" Clara asked. He handed it to her. She smoothed it out, read the crude scrawl. "Last warning. Get rid of her or lose everything." Clara's hands shook. "They burned your barn." "They tried." "What if they come back?" Rowan turned to face her. In the dim light, his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. "Then we'll be ready." They spent the next 2 days fortifying. Rowan taught Clara how to load and fire a rifle. Not for hunting, for defense. He showed her where to position herself if someone came onto the property. They set up tripwires near the road, moved valuables inside the house. Clara didn't ask if he thought it would work. She just learned. Because she wasn't leaving, and neither was he. On the third night, Clara found Rowan sitting on the porch, rifle across his lap. She sat down beside him. "You don't have to do this." "Do what?" "Protect me. Risk everything for someone you barely know." Rowan was quiet. Then, "You think I'm doing this for you? Aren't you?" "I'm doing it because I'm tired of letting people push me around, tired of running, tired of being afraid." He looked at her. "You showed up here and refused to be ashamed of yourself. Refused to apologize for existing. That's more than I've done in 5 years. Clara felt her throat tighten. "I'm not brave. I'm just out of options." "Same thing sometimes." They sat in silence, watching the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were planning, plotting, deciding when and how to make their next move. But here, on this porch, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she mattered. "Whatever happens," Rowan said quietly, "we face it together." Clara nodded. Together. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she believed they might actually survive this. The weeks that followed the barn fire moved like a slow-burning fuse. Every morning, Clara woke expecting violence. Every night she slept with one ear open, listening for footsteps, for horses, for the crack of breaking wood. But nothing came. The silence was worse than the threats. Rowan changed after that night. Not drastically, but in small ways, Clara noticed. He stayed closer to the house during the day, checked the perimeter more often, kept the rifle within arm's reach even during meals. And he talked more, not a lot, but enough that Clara started to understand the shape of his thoughts. They were sitting on the porch one evening, the sky bleeding orange and purple, when he finally spoke about the war. "I was in Kansas," he said suddenly, breaking a silence that had stretched for 20 minutes. "During the border conflicts. Before the big war, but same kind of violence, same kind of hate." Clara didn't move. Didn't want to spook him into stopping. "I was young. Thought I was doing the right thing. Thought there was a right thing." He stared at the horizon. "Turns out when everyone's convinced they're righteous, people just die faster." "What happened?" "We burned a town. Not soldiers, civilians, women, kids." His voice was flat, empty. "Orders were to clear out rebel sympathizers. They said everyone there was guilty, so we did what we were told." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You didn't want to." "Doesn't matter what I wanted. I did it." He finally looked at her. "That's why I came out here, why I don't go into town, why I don't let people get close. Because I know what I am. And I know what happens when good people convince themselves someone else deserves to suffer." "You think that's what's happening now? With me?" "I know it is. Towns decided you're the enemy. Doesn't matter if it's true. They need someone to blame, someone to punish. Makes them feel righteous. He stood, brushed dust off his pants. But I'm done burning people to make other people feel better about themselves. He walked inside, leaving Clara alone with the dying light. She understood him better now. The distance, the silence, the way he flinched at sudden noises. He wasn't just protecting her. He was trying to be someone different than the person he'd been. Clara wondered if she was doing the same thing. The next morning, a letter arrived. It wasn't delivered by the postal rider. It was nailed to the fence post nearest the road, same spot as the last warning. Clara found it while checking the water line. She pulled it down, unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. Miss Vance, this is your final opportunity to depart peacefully. Mr. Hale has been a tolerated presence in this community, but your continued residence threatens the moral fabric of our town. We do not wish to involve the authorities, but we are prepared to do so. Vagrancy laws exist for a reason. We suggest you consider your position carefully. Respectfully, the Millerton Town Council. Clara read it twice, then walked back to the house. Rowan was inside, repairing a saddle. She handed him the letter without a word. He read it, face expressionless. Then he crumpled it and tossed it into the stove. Respectfully, he muttered. They threaten you, and sign it respectfully. What are vagrancy laws? Laws that let them arrest anyone without work or permanent residence. Except you're working. You're residing here, so they're bluffing. He set the saddle aside. But they're getting desperate. That's dangerous. Should I be scared? Yes, but don't let them see it. Clara nodded. She was learning that from him, how to keep fear buried so deep no one could use it against you. That afternoon, they rode out to check the north fence line. It was the farthest section of the property where the land rose into rocky hills. Rowan brought the rifle. Clara brought a canteen and wire cutters. They worked in companionable silence, Rowan cutting away damaged sections while Clara spliced in new wire. The sun was brutal. Sweat soaked through Clara's shirt. Her hands were raw from the wire, blistered from the pliers. You're getting better at this, Rowan said, watching her twist the wire into place. Better than mucking stalls. Barely. She almost smiled. Rowan's humor was dry as dust, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. They finished the section and moved to the next post. That's when they saw the rider. He was far off, just a silhouette against the sky, but he was watching them. Clara could feel it. Friend of yours? She asked quietly. Rowan's jaw tightened. No. They kept working, but the rider didn't move, just sat there on his horse, observing. After 10 minutes, he turned and rode away slowly, deliberately. They're watching us now, Clara said. They've always been watching. Now they want us to know it. They finished the fence and rode back in silence. The whole way, Clara kept glancing over her shoulder. The land felt hostile suddenly, like it was full of eyes. When they reached the ranch, Rowan dismounted and stood staring at the road for a long time. What are you thinking? Clara asked. That it's going to get worse before it gets better. And if it doesn't get better? He looked at her, face hard. Then we make sure we're still standing when the dust settles. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay on the cot, listening to the house creak and settle. Around midnight, she got up and walked outside. The air was cool, the sky vast and star-filled. Rowan was already out there, sitting on the porch steps. Can't sleep either? Clara asked. Never could. Not for years. She sat beside him. They didn't speak for a while, just watched the darkness. You ever think about what happens if they win? Clara asked. If they force me out? They're not going to. But if they do, they won't. His voice was firm. I've run from fights before, spent 5 years running. I'm done. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. He turned to face her. The moment they came onto my land and told me who I could employ, who I could help, they made it my fight. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not gratitude. Something deeper, harder to name. Why do you care so much? She asked quietly. Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then, because you're the first person in 5 years who hasn't looked at me like I'm broken. You don't ask about my past. Don't try to fix me. You just work. Exist. Fight your own battles. He exhaled slowly. Reminds me there's more to life than hiding. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she just sat there, shoulder almost touching his, watching the night. We're quite a pair, she said finally. The thief who didn't steal and the soldier who can't forget. Maybe that's why we understand each other. Maybe. They sat until dawn started to lighten the sky. Then Rowan stood, stretched, and headed inside to make coffee. Clara stayed a moment longer, watching the sun rise over the mountains. For the first time since she'd arrived, she felt something other than survival driving her. She felt purpose. The town made its next move 3 days later. Clara was in the barn, feeding the horses, when she heard voices. Multiple voices. She stepped outside and froze. 5 men stood in the yard. 3 wore suits, town officials by the look of them. The other 2 wore badges, deputies. Rowan was already there, standing between them and the house. His hand rested casually near his hip. Clara knew he was armed. Gentlemen, Rowan said flatly, you're trespassing. The man in the center, older, silver-haired, expensive suit, smiled thinly. Mr. Hale, I'm Charles Pritchard. We haven't been formally introduced. I know who you are. Good. Then you know I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here as a concerned citizen. Pritchard's eyes flicked to Clara. And as president of the town council. What do you want? Simply to discuss the situation. May we come inside? No. Pritchard's smile didn't waver. Very well, we'll discuss it here. Mr. Hale, the council has received numerous complaints regarding your employee. Miss Vance's presence has created significant concern among the town's upstanding families. That's not my problem. Actually, it is. You see, we've reviewed the relevant ordinances. Miss Vance has no legal documentation of employment, no contract, no proof of wages. Under territorial law, that constitutes vagrancy. She's working for room and board, that's legal. Perhaps, but there are also moral considerations. A woman of questionable character living alone with an unmarried man. Pritchard let the implication hang. Clara stepped forward. I'm standing right here. You want to insult me? Do it to my face. Pritchard turned to her, and his smile vanished. What replaced it was colder, more honest. Miss Vance, I don't know what you did in your previous town, and frankly, I don't care. What I care about is maintaining order in my community. Your presence disrupts that order. By existing? By refusing to understand your place. He stepped closer. Women like you, without family, without reputation, without prospects, are a burden. And we don't tolerate burdens here. Women like me. Clara's voice was steel. Say what you really mean. Very well. You're a woman of no virtue, no value, and no future. And I want you gone. The words landed like blows, but Clara didn't flinch. No. Pritchard's eyes narrowed. I'm offering you a choice. Leave peacefully and we'll provide transportation to the next town. Stay and we'll arrest you for vagrancy. You'll spend 30 days in jail, then be expelled from the territory entirely. On what grounds? On whatever grounds I decide. Pritchard smiled again. I own the bank. I own half the businesses. I fund the sheriff's office. In this town, I am the law. Rowan moved forward. You're done here. Get off my property. Not yet. Pritchard pulled a document from his jacket. This is a formal complaint filed with the territorial court. It alleges that Miss Vance is engaging in immoral conduct and represents a public nuisance. The court has issued a summons. She's to appear in 5 days. He held out the paper. Rowan didn't take it. After a moment, Pritchard dropped it on the ground. 5 days, Mr. Hale. After that, we'll come with a warrant. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day. The 5 men mounted their horses and rode out. Clara and Rowan stood in the yard watching them disappear. Clara picked up the summons, unfolded it. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Appear in court or be arrested. This is it, she said quietly. This is how they're going to force me out. Rowan took the paper, read it carefully. Maybe not. How? You heard him. He owns everything. He owns the town, but he doesn't own the court. Judges are appointed by the territorial government. They don't answer to Pritchard. You think that matters? You think some judge is going to side with me over the man who runs the whole town? I don't know. Rowan folded the summons, handed it back to her. But we're going to find out. Clara stared at him. You want me to fight this? In court? You got a better idea? I could leave, save you the trouble. That's not a better idea. That's surrender. His voice was hard. You told those men in town you weren't leaving. You told me you were staying, so stay and fight. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. What if we lose? Then we lose. But at least we'll lose fighting. She nodded slowly. All right. What do we do? First, we find out what we're up against. Second, we prepare. Third, he met her eyes. We don't back down, no matter what they throw at us. The next 3 days were tense. Rowan rode into town twice, talking to people he knew, few as they were. He came back with fragments of information, bits of gossip, and one crucial piece of news. The judge assigned to Clara's case was a man named Samuel Garrett, known for being rigid but fair. Fair means we've got a chance, Rowan said, but it also means we need evidence. Proof that you're employed, that you're not a vagrant, that you're not… He trailed off. Immoral, Clara finished. They're going to paint me as a whore, you know that, right? They're going to try. And how do we fight that? My word against theirs? I'm not exactly a credible witness. Rowan sat down at the table thinking. We don't fight their story. We tell ours. Show the judge who you actually are, what you've done here. Make them prove their accusations instead of making you disprove them. You sound like you've done this before. I was court-martialed once, after Kansas. Charges were dropped, but I learned how the system works. It's not about truth, it's about who tells the better story. Clara absorbed that. Then we need a story. We've got one. You came here for honest work. I hired you. You've been working hard ever since. That's it. Simple. True. Simple doesn't win against Pritchard's money and influence. No, but it's a start. The night before the hearing, Clara barely slept. She lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. They'd call her a vagrant, a liar, a woman of loose morals. They'd question why she was really here, why Rowan had taken her in. They'd imply things, suggest things, twist everything until the truth didn't matter anymore. She got up before dawn, washed in cold water, and put on her cleanest dress. It was still worn, still dusty. But it was the best she had. Rowan was already up, dressed in a suit Clara had never seen him wear. It was old-fashioned, a little tight across the shoulders, but clean. He looked uncomfortable. Didn't know you owned a suit, Clara said. I don't like to advertise it. He adjusted the collar awkwardly. You ready? No? Good. Neither am I. They rode into town together, side by side. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the empty street. By the time they reached the courthouse, a 2-story brick building at the end of Main Street, a crowd had already gathered. Clara's stomach twisted. Half the town was there, it seemed. Women in fine dresses whispering behind fans, men in suits talking in low voices. And at the center of it all, Charles Pritchard, standing like a general surveying his troops. Ignore them, Rowan said quietly. Eyes forward, head up. They dismounted and walked toward the courthouse. The crowd parted, but the whispers followed them like smoke. That's her. Shameless. Can you believe she had the nerve to show her face? Clara kept walking. Rowan stayed close, a solid presence beside her. They entered the courthouse. The courtroom was small, plain, wooden benches, a raised platform for the judge, a clerk's desk. A handful of people were already seated. Pritchard entered behind them, along with the lawyer Clara didn't recognize. Sheriff Brennan was there too, standing near the back. He caught Rowan's eye and nodded once. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. All rise, the clerk called. The Honorable Judge Samuel Garrett presiding. The judge entered. He was older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair and a face that gave nothing away. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and looked out over the courtroom. Case of Pritchard versus Vance, public nuisance and vagrancy. He looked at Clara. Miss Vance, you're representing yourself? Clara stood. Yes, sir. You understand the charges? I do. And how do you plead? Not guilty, sir. The judge made a note. Very well. Mr. Pritchard, you're bringing this complaint? Charles Pritchard stood, and his lawyer stood with him. I am, Your Honor. on behalf of the Millerton Town Council and the concerned citizens of this community. Proceed. What followed was an hour of slow, methodical character assassination. Pritchard's lawyer laid out the case with surgical precision. Clara Vance, a woman with no family, no references, no documented employment history. She'd arrived in town under suspicious circumstances and had taken up residence with a known recluse. She had no visible means of support. She'd been seen in town causing disturbances, refusing to leave when asked. Multiple witnesses were prepared to testify to her disruptive presence. Then the witnesses started. First was the storekeeper. She came into my shop making demands, acting like she belonged there. When I asked her to leave, she became belligerent. Clara bit her tongue. That wasn't how it happened, but contradicting him would make her look defensive. Next was the woman from the charitable society. Mr. Hale's ranch has always been on the margins of respectability, but since Miss Vance arrived, it's become a source of scandal. Decent people are afraid to go near the property. Then Daniel Pritchard himself. He spoke smoothly, confidently. I tried to help Miss Vance, Your Honor, offered her assistance finding proper employment in another town. She refused, became hostile. It was clear she had no interest in conducting herself appropriately. Lie after lie, delivered with perfect sincerity. Clara felt rage building in her chest, but Rowan's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Stay calm. Finally, Charles Pritchard himself took the stand. Your Honor, I don't take pleasure in this action, but as a community leader, I have a responsibility. Miss Vance represents everything we've worked to prevent in this territory. Lawlessness, moral decay, the breakdown of civilized society. If we allow people like her to take root, we invite chaos. He looked directly at Clara. I believe in second chances. But Miss Vance has shown no inclination to reform, no willingness to accept the help we've offered. She must be removed for the good of the community. It was a masterful performance, reasonable, concerned, righteous. The judge looked at Clara. Miss Vance, you may present your defense. Clara stood. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. Your Honor, everything they've said is a lie. Not all of it. Some of the facts are true, but the story they're telling is false. She took a breath. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. That's true. Mr. Hale hired me because he needed help. That's also true. I've been working on his ranch every day since I arrived. I've been paid in room and board, which is legal. I haven't caused disturbances. I haven't been belligerent. I've been trying to survive. And the allegations of immoral conduct? There is no immoral conduct. Mr. Hale and I work together. That's all. You're living under his roof. In a separate room. We're not... Clara felt her face heat. We're not involved. He's my employer. I'm his employee. The judge made a note. Mr. Hale, do you wish to speak? Rowan stood. Yes, sir. Proceed. Rowan stepped forward, and Clara saw something she'd never seen before. He looked nervous. Your Honor, I hired Miss Vance because I needed help and she needed work. That's the beginning and end of it. She's been a good worker, reliable, hardworking. She hasn't caused any trouble on my property or anywhere else. He paused. The only trouble has been from people in town who decided she doesn't belong here. And with respect, Your Honor, that's not a legal basis for anything. You're aware of her background, the accusations in her former town? I'm aware she was falsely accused of theft and later exonerated. Yes. And you don't find that concerning? No, sir. I find it familiar. I know what it's like to be accused of things you didn't do, to have people decide you're guilty before they know the truth. Rowan's voice was stronger now. Miss Vance is being punished for existing, for being poor, for not having the right connections. That's not justice. That's persecution. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel. Order. He looked at Rowan. Strong words, Mr. Hale. True words, Your Honor. Charles Pritchard stood. Your Honor, if I may... Sit down, Mr. Pritchard. The judge's voice was sharp. I've heard enough. The room fell silent. Judge Garrett removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly, put them back on. He looked at Clara, then at Rowan, then at Pritchard. I'm going to be very clear about something, he said. I don't like these kinds of cases. They waste the court's time, and they're usually brought by people with personal vendettas pretending to care about public welfare. He looked directly at Pritchard. Mr. Pritchard, You've presented no evidence of actual vagrancy. Miss Vance is employed, she has housing. Your other allegations, moral turpitude, public nuisance, are subjective at best and vindictive at worst. Pritchard's face darkened. Your Honor, I'm not finished. However, the judge turned to Clara. Miss Vance, you're in a precarious position. Your employment arrangement is informal. Your living situation is unusual. While I don't believe you're guilty of the charges as stated, I also can't ignore the concerns of the community entirely. Clara's heart sank. He was going to rule against her anyway. Therefore, I'm dismissing the vagrancy charge. There's no legal basis for it. But I'm issuing a conditional ruling on the nuisance allegation. He paused. Miss Vance, you're free to remain in the territory, but you must formalize your employment with Mr. Hale within 30 days. A written contract, documented wages, proper legal standing. If you can't do that, you'll have to leave. Clara felt dizzy. It wasn't what she'd hoped for, but it wasn't disaster either. Do you understand? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hale, do you agree to these terms? Rowan nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Then this case is closed. The judge banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. The room exploded into noise. Pritchard was on his feet, his lawyer trying to calm him down. The crowd was buzzing, but Clara barely heard any of it. She'd won. Sort of. Maybe. Rowan grabbed her arm. Come on, let's get out of here. They pushed through the crowd and out into the sunlight. Clara felt like she couldn't breathe, like she might laugh or cry or scream. We did it, she said. We actually... Not yet. Rowan's face was grim. We bought time, but Pritchard isn't done. You saw his face. What do we do? We formalize your employment like the judge said, and we prepare for whatever comes next. They mounted their horses and started riding out of town. Behind them, Clara heard shouting, angry voices. She didn't look back. Halfway home, Rowan spoke. That was brave. What you did in there. I was terrified. Brave doesn't mean not scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. Clara looked at him. You were brave too. Maybe. They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the ranch, Clara dismounted and stood in the yard, looking at the house, the barn, the mountains beyond. This place had become something to her. Not just shelter. Something more. Rowan, she said suddenly. He turned. Thank you. For standing beside me in there. For not giving up. He nodded once. You would have done the same. Would I? Yeah, I think you would. Clara realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about survival. It had become about loyalty, about partnership, about two people who'd been cast aside by the world, finding something worth fighting for in each other. Let's get inside, Rowan said. We've got a contract to write. Clara followed him into the house, feeling something shift in her chest. The fight wasn't over. Pritchard would come back. The town would keep pushing. But for the first time, Clara believed they might actually win. That night, they sat at the kitchen table with paper and ink between them, trying to write something that would satisfy a judge and keep the wolves at bay. The lamp flickered. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Employment contract between Rowan Hale and Clara Vance. Rowan read aloud what he'd written. Dated this day, October 14th. Terms. Miss Vance will perform ranch labor including but not limited to livestock care, fence maintenance, and general upkeep. Compensation, room, board, and... He stopped. We need to put a wage amount. But you're not paying me. I know that. You know that. But the contract needs to say something. He tapped the pen against the table. How about $5 a month? You don't have $5 a month to spare. Doesn't matter. The contract just has to exist. I'll pay you when I can. Clara studied him. You're going broke to keep me here. I'm barely keeping the ranch afloat anyway. One more mouth to feed doesn't change much. He went back to writing. $5 monthly, payable at end of each month. Duration of employment, indefinite, terminable by either party with 2 weeks' notice. He looked up. That sound legal enough? How would I know? Fair point. He signed his name at the bottom, slid the paper across to her. Your turn. Clara picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the page. This felt bigger than just a signature. More permanent. Like she was admitting she belonged here, that this place was hers to claim. She signed her name. Clara Vance. The letters looked strange, formal. There, Rowan said, taking the contract back. We'll file this with the county clerk tomorrow. Make it official. And then? Then we wait. See what Pritchard does next. Clara leaned back in her chair. He's not going to stop. No. So what's the point? We're just delaying the inevitable. Rowan folded the contract carefully, tucked it into his jacket pocket. Maybe, but delay is better than surrender. Every day you're still here is a day you're not where they want you. And where's that? Gone. Disappeared. Forgotten. He stood, moved to the stove, poured coffee that had been sitting too long. People like Pritchard need everyone to know their place. You being here, refusing to leave, that's dangerous to them. Makes other people think they can do the same. I'm not trying to be dangerous. I'm just trying to exist. Same thing sometimes. Clara accepted the cup of bad coffee he handed her. They drank in silence. The wind picked up outside, howling through gaps in the walls. Storm coming, Rowan said. Real one or metaphorical? Both, probably. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to rain hammering the roof. She dressed quickly, went outside to check on the horses. The barn was dry, but the wind was pushing rain through every crack. The horses were restless, stamping and snorting. Easy, Clara murmured, running a hand down the nearest horse's neck. Just weather. Nothing to worry about. But she didn't believe it herself. Something felt wrong. The air was too heavy, too charged. She finished with the horses and ran back to the house. Rowan was standing on the porch, staring at the road. What is it? Clara asked. Riders, 3 of them, coming fast. Clara's stomach dropped. She moved beside him, squinting through the rain. 3 shapes materialized out of the gray, men on horseback, pushing hard despite the weather. Get inside, Rowan said quietly. No. Clara, no. We're in this together, remember? He looked at her, something complicated moving across his face. Then he nodded. Stay behind me. The riders pulled up in the yard. Clara recognized 2 of them, deputies from the courthouse. The third was Daniel Pritchard, soaked and furious. Hail! Pritchard shouted over the rain. We need to talk. Talk from there. You're not welcome on my property. Pritchard dismounted, started walking toward the porch. The deputies followed. All 3 were armed. Rowan's hand moved to his hip. I said, stay there. Pritchard stopped 10 feet away. Rain streamed down his face. You think you won yesterday? You think that judge did you a favor? I think he dismissed a bullshit charge and you didn't like it. That contract you're going to file, it won't help. My father's already talking to the territorial governor. They're going to review the judge's decision. And when they do, they'll see what everyone else sees. A vagrant and the fool protecting her. Then let them review it. I've got nothing to hide. Don't you? Pritchard stepped closer. Water dripped from his hat. I've been asking questions about you, Hale. About your time in Kansas. About what you did there. About why you really came out here. Rowan's face went blank, but Clara saw his jaw clench. You want to drag my past into this? Rowan said quietly. Go ahead. But it won't change anything about Clara. Maybe not legally, but reputation matters. And when people find out what kind of man you really are, no judge will side with you. Pritchard smiled, vicious. War criminal protecting a vagrant. That's the story we'll tell. See how long you last. Clara stepped forward before she could stop herself. You're pathetic, all of you. You've got money, power, the whole town behind you, and you're still so threatened by one woman that you'll destroy a man's life just to get rid of her? Pritchard turned his smile on her. You're not just one woman, Miss Vance. You're a symbol of everything we don't want in this territory. Poverty, desperation, moral weakness. Let you stay and soon we'll be overrun with people like you. People like me? People who work hard and ask for nothing? People who don't know their place. The words hung in the rain. Clara felt rage so pure it made her dizzy. My place, she said slowly, is wherever I decide it is. Not where you tell me, not where your father tells me, where I choose. Brave words for someone with nothing. Better than being a coward with everything. Pritchard's face darkened. He stepped forward, hand moving toward his gun. One of the deputies grabbed his arm. Not worth it, the deputy muttered. We delivered the message. Let's go. Pritchard shook him off, but didn't move closer. You've got 2 weeks, Hale. 2 weeks before the governor's office makes their decision. Use them wisely. He mounted his horse, looked down at them. And Miss Vance? Start packing, because one way or another, you're leaving. They rode off into the rain. Clara and Rowan stood on the porch, soaked and silent. Finally, Rowan spoke. Kansas. They're going to use Kansas against me. What happened there? I told you, we burned a town, killed civilians. He turned to her, face haunted. I followed orders, didn't question them, and people died because of it. Women, children. I can still hear them screaming. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Were you charged? Court-martialed, charges dropped when my commanding officer took responsibility. But everyone knew. Everyone knew what I'd done. He looked at his hands. That's why I came here. To disappear. To stop being that person. You're not that person anymore. Tell that to the families I destroyed. Rowan, they're going to drag it all out, print it in newspapers, make sure everyone knows, and they'll be right to. I am a war criminal. I did those things. Clara grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. And you've spent 5 years trying to atone for it. Living alone, hurting yourself, refusing to forgive yourself. That has to count for something. It doesn't bring anyone back. No. But it means you're not the same man who followed those orders. You're the man who stood up in court for me, who's risking everything to do the right thing now. She squeezed his arm. I don't care what you did 5 years ago. I care about who you are today. Rowan stared at her. Rain dripped from his hair. Why? Because you're the first person who saw me as something other than a problem to solve or a stain to erase. Because you treated me like I mattered. Her voice cracked. Because you're a good man, Rowan. Even if you don't believe it. He pulled away, walked to the edge of the porch. If they publish what I did, you'll be associated with it. They'll say you're being protected by a murderer. It'll be worse than before. I don't care. You should. Well, I don't. Clara moved beside him. We're in this together. That's what you said. So we face it together. All of it. Kansas, the governor, Pritchard, everything. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then something in his face softened, just slightly. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most stubborn. Can it be both? Almost a smile. Almost. They went inside, changed into dry clothes. Claire made coffee while Rowan stared at the contract on the table. We still filing this? He asked. Yes. Even knowing what's coming? Especially knowing what's coming. We do everything by the book. Give them nothing to use against us. She poured 2 cups. And whatever they dig up about Kansas, we tell the truth. Don't hide, don't apologize. Just explain what happened and why you're different now. You think that'll work? I think it's all we've got. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Rowan wrote out a statement about Kansas. Clean, factual, taking full responsibility, but also explaining the context. Clara organized every piece of documentation they had. Work records, supply receipts, anything that proved she was employed and contributing. By evening, they had a stack of papers that might mean nothing or might save everything. Tomorrow we ride to the county seat, Rowan said. File the contract, submit my statement, make it official. And then? Then we come back here and wait for the storm. That night, Clara lay on her cot and couldn't shut her mind off. Everything was coming to a head. She could feel it. The pressure building, the tension stretching. Something was going to break. She got up, walked to the main room. Rowan was sitting at the table, reading something by lamplight. Can't sleep? He asked without looking up. No, you? Gave up trying years ago. He set the paper down. It was a letter, old and creased. From my sister. Last one she sent before she stopped writing. What does it say? That she's ashamed of me. That I brought dishonor to the family. That I should have died instead of the people in Kansas. His voice was flat. She's not wrong. Clara sat across from him. She's wrong about the last part. You dying wouldn't have saved anyone. Might have made the world better, though. Stop it. Stop what? Punishing yourself. You've been doing it for 5 years. It's not helping anyone. It helps me remember what I did. You're never going to forget. Trust me. Some things burn themselves into you forever. Clara reached across the table, put her hand over his. But remembering doesn't mean you have to keep suffering. It means you have to keep trying to be better. Rowan looked at their hands, didn't pull away. How'd you get so wise? He asked quietly. I'm not wise. I'm just tired of watching people destroy themselves for mistakes they can't undo. They sat like that for a while, hands touching across scarred wood. The lamp flickered. Outside, the rain had stopped, but wind still howled through the darkness. Finally, Rowan spoke. If they make you leave, if the governor sides with Pritchard, what will you do? I don't know. Find another town, I guess. Start over somewhere else. You could stay in the territory, work for someone else. Who's going to hire me after this? Once Pritchard's done spreading his story, I'll be poison everywhere. Then leave the territory, go west, California, somewhere they don't know you. Clara pulled her hand back. What about you? What about me? You coming with me? Or are you going to stay here and disappear again? The question hung between them. Rowan didn't answer. That's what I thought, Clara said, standing. We're only in this together until it gets too hard. Then I'm on my own again. That's not fair, isn't it? You talk about fighting, about standing your ground, but you're already planning your retreat, already figuring out how to go back to being alone. I'm trying to be practical. You're trying to protect yourself from caring. Clara's voice rose. You're so afraid of being hurt again that you won't let anyone close, not even me. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? You told me about Kansas, about your sister, about why you came here, but you're still holding back, still keeping distance, because if you let yourself care, someone might disappoint you. Or worse, you might disappoint them. Rowan stood, face hard. You want me to say I care? Fine. I care. I care that you're here. I care that you're fighting. I care that Pritchard's trying to destroy you. Happy? No, because you say it like it's a weakness. Maybe it is. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she was too angry to let them fall. Then you're a coward. You survived Kansas. You survived 5 years of guilt and isolation, but you can't survive letting one person matter to you. She walked back to her room, shut the door hard. She lay on the cot, shaking, from anger, from fear, from everything crashing down at once. A minute later, she heard Rowan's door close. They didn't speak the next morning, just moved around each other in tense silence, preparing for the ride to the county seat. The contract, the statement, all the pieces they needed to file. The ride was long and uncomfortable. They stayed a horse length apart, neither willing to break the silence first. The county seat was a larger town than Millerton, busier, louder, more anonymous. They found the clerk's office and filed the papers. The clerk barely looked at them, just stamped everything and filed it away. That's it? Clara asked. That's it, the clerk said. Contract's official as of today. Anything else? No, thank you. They walked outside into bright sunlight. The main street was crowded with wagons and people going about their business. Nobody knew them here. Nobody cared. We should get back, Rowan said. Wait. Clara grabbed his arm. Can we just stop? For a minute? He looked at her, confused. I don't want to go back yet. I don't want to spend another day waiting for the hammer to fall. Can we just be two people for a few hours? Not the outcast and the war criminal, just Clara and Rowan. Something shifted in his face. What do you want to do? I don't know, anything, nothing, something that's not preparing for the end. They walked through town, got coffee at a small cafe where nobody recognized them, sat at a corner table and didn't talk about contracts or governors or men who wanted them gone. Tell me something about yourself, Clara said. Something that has nothing to do with Kansas or courts or any of this. Rowan thought for a moment. I used to play fiddle. What? Before the war, my father taught me. I was decent at it. Why'd you stop? Because music's for people who have something to celebrate, and I don't. That's sad. That's honest. Clara sipped her coffee. I used to want to be a dress designer, not just a seamstress, an actual designer, creating my own patterns, my own styles. She smiled bitterly. Stupid dream for someone like me. Why is it stupid? Because designers need connections, money, education, things I'll never have. Doesn't make the dream stupid, just hard. They sat in silence, drinking bad coffee and watching strangers pass by the window. I'm sorry, Clara said suddenly, for what I said last night, about you being a coward. You weren't wrong. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on you. Rowan set his cup down. I am scared, of letting you matter, because everyone I've cared about either died or left or told me I was a monster. So yeah, I keep distance. Safer that way. For who? Both of us. Clara reached across the table, took his hand. What if I told you I don't want safety? What if I told you I'd rather have something real and painful than nothing at all? Rowan's fingers tightened around hers. Then I'd say you're braver than me. Or stupider. Maybe that too. They sat like that, hands clasped over a cheap table in a town where nobody knew their names. For a few hours, they were just two people trying to find something solid in a world that kept shifting under their feet. Eventually, they had to leave, had to ride back toward the ranch, toward whatever was waiting. Halfway home, Rowan spoke. If they force you out, if the governor rules against us, I'm coming with you. Clara turned to look at him. What? You asked last night if I was coming with you. I'm saying yes. If you have to leave, I'm leaving too. What about the ranch? It's just land. He trailed off, then started again. You matter more than land. Clara felt her throat tighten. Rowan, let me finish. I've spent 5 years hiding, punishing myself, being alone, and then you showed up and wouldn't leave, wouldn't hide, wouldn't apologize for existing. And I realized I've been dead for 5 years, just breathing and working, but not alive. You made me remember what it feels like to care about something other than guilt. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You stood in that courtroom and fought. You stood in my yard and faced down armed men. You refused to disappear. He looked at her. You're the bravest person I know, and if they make you leave, I'm not letting you face the world alone again. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. You mean that? Every word. She nodded, wiping her face. Okay. Together then. Whatever happens. Whatever happens. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it felt different now. Less like two separate people and more like something whole. When they reached the ranch, smoke was rising from the barn. No, Rowan whispered, then louder. No! He kicked his horse into a gallop. Clara followed, heart pounding. The barn wasn't fully ablaze yet, but fire was crawling up one wall. Rowan jumped off his horse before it fully stopped, ran inside. Clara heard him yelling, heard the horses screaming. She ran to the well, started hauling water. By the time Rowan got the horses out, she had 3 buckets ready. They threw water on the flames, working in frantic rhythm. The fire fought back, hungry and persistent. It took an hour to kill it. By the end, they were both black with smoke, coughing, and exhausted. The barn was damaged, but standing. Rowan walked to the source of the fire, the same wall where it had started last time. There was an oil-soaked rag wedged into the boards, still smoldering. They came while we were gone, he said quietly. Waited until we left and tried to burn us out again. Clara looked at the damage. This was worse than before, more deliberate, more vicious. This is escalating, she said. They're trying to break us, make us scared enough to give up. Is it working? Rowan looked at her, face hard. What do you think? Clara met his eyes. I think we patch the barn and keep fighting. That's what I think, too. They worked until dark, patching the worst of the damage. Their hands were blistered, their clothes destroyed, but the barn would hold. That night, Rowan set up watch. He brought the rifle onto the porch, loaded it, and sat in the darkness. Clara brought him coffee around midnight. You can't stay up all night. Watch me. Rowan, they're not burning this place while I sleep. Not again. She sat beside him. Then I'm staying up too. You don't have to. Neither do you, but here we are. They sat in the darkness, watching the perimeter. Every sound made them tense. Wind through grass, animals moving, branches cracking. The night felt hostile, full of threats they couldn't see. Around 2 a.m, Clara spoke. Why do they hate me so much? I never did anything to them. Because you exist outside their system. You're not married, not employed by one of their families, not grateful for their charity. You're just yourself. And that's dangerous to people who need everyone to follow the same rules. The rules didn't help me. When I followed them, I still ended up here. That's what they don't want others to realize. That the system only works for some people. That respectability won't save you if you're not born into the right family or don't have the right connections. Clara leaned against the porch post. I'm tired, Rowan. I'm so tired of fighting. I know. But I can't stop. Because if I stop, they win. And if they win here, they'll win everywhere, and people like us will never have a place. Then we don't stop. Even if it kills us? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, if it kills us, at least we'll die fighting for something that matters. That's more than most people can say. Clara closed her eyes. She was exhausted, terrified, angry, but underneath it all, she felt something else. Something solid and unwavering. She felt purpose. Morning came gray and cold. They'd both dozed off around dawn, slumped against each other on the porch. Clara woke first, neck stiff and aching. Rowan was still sleeping, head tilted back, rifle across his lap. She watched him for a moment. His face was younger in sleep, less guarded. She could see traces of the man he must have been before Kansas, before guilt carved lines into his skin and shadows into his eyes. She stood carefully, not wanting to wake him. But he jerked awake anyway, hand going to the rifle. Easy, Clara said. Just me. He relaxed, rubbed his face. What time is it? Early. Sun's not even up yet. They went inside, made breakfast in silence. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, more intimate, like the walls had shifted closer while they slept. What's the plan? Clara asked, pushing eggs around her plate. We wait. See what the governor's office decides. Keep working. Keep watching. Rowan drank his coffee, grimaced. And we prepare for them to come back. Because they will. How do you prepare for someone burning your home down? You don't. You just make sure you're ready to rebuild. They spent the day reinforcing the barn, checking fences, moving anything valuable into the house. It felt like preparing for war, which Clara supposed it was. Late afternoon, Sheriff Brennan rode up, alone. Rowan stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Tom. Rowan, Clara. The sheriff looked tired. I need to talk to you both. About? About the fire. I heard what happened. Did you now? Interesting, since we didn't report it. Word travels. Brennan dismounted but stayed near his horse. Look, I'm not here officially. I'm here because I'm trying to help. Help how? Clara asked. By telling you to leave, both of you, before this gets worse. Rowan's jaw tightened. That your advice or Pritchard's orders? My advice. Charles Pritchard is not a forgiving man, and he's got the resources to make your lives hell until you break. You won the first round in court, but he's already appealing, and he's got lawyers working on new charges. He won't stop. Neither will we. Brennan sighed. Rowan, I know you. Known you since you came to this territory. You're a good man who's been through bad things. But this fight, you can't win it. Pritchard's got too much money, too much influence. He'll destroy you. Let him try. And what about her? Brennan nodded at Clara. You willing to drag her down with you? Because that's what'll happen. They'll ruin both of you. Clara stepped forward. I can speak for myself, Sheriff. And I'm staying. Miss Vance, with respect, no. With respect, I'm done listening to men tell me what's best for me. I know what's best, and it's not running every time someone powerful decides I'm inconvenient. Brennan looked between them, then shook his head. You're both fools. Probably, Rowan said, but we're fools together. The sheriff mounted his horse. When it all falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. He rode off. Clara turned to Rowan. Everyone keeps saying we're going to lose. Everyone thought the South would win, too. Sometimes being sure you're right doesn't make you right. But sometimes it does. Yeah, sometimes it does. They went back to work, knowing the storm was coming closer, knowing that soon something would break, but determined to be standing when it did. That night, Clara found Rowan outside again, standing in the dark. She walked up beside him without speaking. After a while, he said, I used to think the worst thing that could happen was being alone. Turns out I was wrong. What's the worst thing? Having someone to lose. Clara took his hand. Then I guess we're both in trouble. He squeezed her fingers. Yeah, I guess we are. They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd been broken by the world, trying to build something neither of them fully understood, something that felt like home, like family, like a reason to keep fighting. The letter arrived 5 days later, delivered by a postal rider who wouldn't meet their eyes. Clara signed for it, watching the man retreat like he was fleeing something contagious. The envelope was official, stamped with the territorial seal. Rowan was in the barn. Clara walked out there slowly, the letter heavy in her hand. He looked up from the bridle he was mending, saw her face, and set it down. That's it, isn't it? He said. I think so. You want me to open it? Clara shook her head. She broke the seal herself, unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the dense legal language, trying to make sense of it. What does it say? Rowan asked. Clara read it twice to be sure. Then she looked up at him. The governor upheld Judge Garrett's original ruling. The contract stands. I can stay. Rowan went very still. You're sure? It says the vagrancy charge was properly dismissed and that our employment arrangement is legally valid. Pritchard's appeal was denied. She kept reading. But there's more. It says, quote, however, concerns raised by the Millerton Town Council regarding moral conduct and community standards warrant continued observation. Should further complaints arise, this office reserves the right to revisit the matter. Meaning they didn't win, but they're keeping the door open. Meaning we bought time, not freedom. Clara folded the letter. How long do you think before they find another angle? Depends how angry Pritchard is, and how creative his lawyers are. Clara laughed bitterly. So we won. Except we didn't really win. We just get to keep fighting. Welcome to the rest of your life, she looked at him. Is it worth it? All this? For a piece of land and the right to exist on it? Rowan walked over to her, took the letter from her hands, set it aside. It's not about the land. It's about refusing to let people like Pritchard decide who gets to have a life. If we give up now, we're saying they were right, that you don't deserve to be here, that I don't deserve a second chance. He met her eyes. So yes, it's worth it. Clara felt something break loose in her chest. Relief, maybe, or exhaustion, or the terrifying realization that this was her life now, constant vigilance, constant fighting, no finish line in sight. I need to sit down, she said. They went back to the house. Clara collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table. Rowan made coffee, strong and terrible, the way they both preferred it now. They sat in silence, processing what the letter meant and what it didn't mean. We should celebrate, Rowan said finally. Celebrate what? Our temporary reprieve? Celebrate that you're still here, that they didn't win. He stood up. Wait here. He disappeared into his room. Clara heard him rummaging through something. When he came back, he was holding a bottle of whiskey, dusty and half full. Saved this from before. Never had a reason to open it. He set it on the table, found 2 cups. Now seems like a good time. He poured. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a clean burn, honest. To stubborn women and broken men, Rowan said, raising his cup. To surviving another day, Clara replied. They drank again. The whiskey loosened something in both of them. Clara felt the tension in her shoulders start to ease. Rowan's face relaxed, lost some of its perpetual wariness. Tell me something, Clara said. Something true. Something you've never told anyone. Rowan refilled his cup. That's a dangerous question. I'm a dangerous woman. Apparently. He smiled. Actually smiled. All right. Something true. He stared into his whiskey. When I was in Kansas, there was a girl, maybe 15. She came running out of one of the buildings we'd set fire to. Her dress was burning. She was screaming. He paused. I froze. Just stood there. One of the other soldiers shot her, said it was mercy, and I did nothing. Clara's hand found his across the table. I think about her every day, Rowan continued. Wonder what her name was, who she might have become, if she had family, if anyone mourned her. He looked at Clara. That's why I can't forgive myself, because I stood there and let her die, and I don't even know her name. What was your commanding officer's name? Claire asked quietly. What? The man who gave the orders, who took responsibility. What was his name? Rowan frowned. Caldwell. Captain James Caldwell. Where is he now? Dead. Killed in action 2 months after Kansas. Convenient, he dies a hero and you're left carrying all the guilt. Clara leaned forward. Rowan, you were how old? 23, 24? A soldier following orders from a superior officer. That doesn't absolve you. But it doesn't make you the only guilty party either. I still did nothing. You were 24 and terrified, in the middle of a war, watching things you'd never seen before, things that probably broke something inside you. She squeezed his hand. I'm not saying you're blameless. I'm saying you're human. And humans freeze. Humans make mistakes. Humans carry guilt that isn't entirely theirs to carry. Rowan pulled his hand away, stood up, walked to the window. You're too good to me. I'm exactly as good to you as you are to me, which is more than either of us deserves and exactly what we both need. He turned around. How do you do that? Do what? Say things that make the world make sense. Practice. Lots of practice being told I don't make sense. They looked at each other across the small kitchen, two damaged people trying to figure out how to fit their broken pieces together in a way that didn't cut. Your turn, Rowan said. Tell me something true. Clara took a drink. I wasn't just accused of stealing that brooch. Before that, there were other accusations. Smaller things. A missing coin purse. Someone's handkerchief. Nothing was ever proven, but the whispers started. She met his eyes. I didn't take those things either, but someone did. Someone who wanted me gone. And they knew the easiest way to destroy a woman with no connections is to question her morals. Who was it? The shop owner's daughter. She wanted my job. Wanted to be the seamstress instead of me. So she planted evidence, started rumors, made sure I was always the first suspect. Clara's voice hardened. When I finally figured it out, I confronted her. She laughed in my face, said no one would ever believe me, and she was right. Did you tell anyone? I told the shop owner, her mother. She fired me on the spot. Clara stared at her whiskey. That's when things got really bad. That's when I understood that the truth doesn't matter if you're the wrong kind of person. And I was definitely the wrong kind. Wrong how? Poor. Alone. Pretty enough to be threatening, but not connected enough to be protected. The perfect target. Rowan came back to the table, sat down. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry, be angry, because it's still happening. Pritchard's doing the same thing she did. Making accusations. Controlling the narrative. Using money and power to erase someone inconvenient. Clara drank the rest of her whiskey. Difference is, this time I'm not running. This time I'm fighting back. We're fighting back. We're fighting back, she echoed. They finished the bottle as the sun went down. The whiskey made everything softer, easier. They talked about things that didn't matter. Childhood memories, half-remembered songs. Places they'd never been, but wanted to see. For a few hours, they weren't the outcast and the war criminal. They were just Clara and Rowan, two people sharing a bottle and a moment of peace. When the whiskey was gone, Rowan stood up, swayed slightly. I should sleep. You should. We both should. But neither of them moved. They stood in the kitchen, facing each other, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Clara, Rowan said quietly. Don't. Don't what? Don't say something we'll both regret in the morning. What if I won't regret it? Clara felt her heart hammering. Then say it when you're sober, when you're sure. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. They went to their separate rooms. Clara lay on her cot, head spinning from whiskey and exhaustion and the weight of everything that had been said and unsaid. She heard Rowan moving around in his room, heard him finally settle, heard the house go quiet. She didn't sleep for hours. Morning came too bright and too early. Clara's head ached. Her mouth tasted like old leather. She dragged herself out of bed and into the kitchen. Rowan was already there, looking as miserable as she felt. Coffee, he grunted, pushing a cup toward her. She drank it gratefully. They didn't speak for a while, just sat nursing their headaches and their hangovers. Finally, Rowan said, About last night, we don't have to talk about it. I want to. I want to say that I meant what I almost said, that I'm not good with words, especially sober, but you should know that you matter to me, more than I thought anyone would ever matter again. Clara set her cup down. Rowan, let me finish. I know this is complicated. I know we're both carrying things that make us difficult to love, but I also know that I'd rather be difficult with you than easy with anyone else. Clara felt tears threatening. You're not difficult, you're just honest, and that's rarer than you think. You didn't answer my question. You didn't ask one. Rowan reached across the table, took her hand. Clara Vance, will you let me care about you? Even though I'm terrible at it? Even though I'm going to mess it up constantly? Even though we're in the middle of a fight we might not win? Clara laughed, which turned into something that might have been a sob. Yes? Yes, you stubborn fool. I'll let you care about me. And I'll care about you. And we'll both mess it up and figure it out and keep going anyway. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. That's the saddest thing anyone's ever said to me. They sat there, holding hands across the table, hungover and honest, and choosing each other despite every reason not to. The moment broke when they heard horses, multiple horses, coming fast. They were on their feet instantly, headaches forgotten. Rowan grabbed the rifle. Clara followed him to the door, 6 riders, all armed. Charles Pritchard at the front, his son Daniel beside him. And behind them 4 men Clara had never seen before. Hard men, the kind who got paid to solve problems with violence. Hail, Pritchard called out. We need to talk. I've got nothing to say to you. That's unfortunate, because I've got plenty to say to you. Pritchard dismounted. The others did too. You received the governor's letter, I assume? We did. And you think you've won? I think we followed the law, and the law sided with us. Pritchard smiled. It wasn't pleasant. The law is a tool, Hale. It works for whoever knows how to use it. You won 1 battle, congratulations. But the war isn't over. What do you want, Charles? I want to make you an offer. One last offer before things get truly unpleasant. He pulled a document from his jacket. I'm prepared to buy your ranch, fair market value plus 20%. Enough money to start over somewhere else, somewhere far from here. The ranch isn't for sale. Everything's for sale. It's just a matter of price. Pritchard stepped closer. I'm being generous here, more generous than you deserve. Take the money. Leave. Start fresh without all this history hanging over you. No. You're not even going to consider it. I've considered it? Answer's no. Pritchard's smile vanished. Then you're a fool. Because if you don't take this offer, I'll take the ranch anyway, and you'll get nothing. How do you figure that? Unpaid taxes, water rights disputes, land boundary questions. I've got lawyers who can tie you up for years, bleed you dry with legal fees until you can't afford to keep fighting. And in the end, you'll lose everything anyway. He glanced at Clara. Including her. Clara stepped forward. I'm not something he can lose. I'm not property. Aren't you, though? Working for room and board, living under his roof, dependent on his charity. Sounds like property to me. Sounds like you're desperate, Clara shot back. Sounds like you're so threatened by 2 people just trying to live their lives that you'll destroy everything to get rid of us. I'm not threatened by you. I'm maintaining order. You're maintaining power. There's a difference. Daniel Pritchard spoke up. Father, let me handle this. Handle what exactly? Rowan asked. Daniel stepped forward, hand resting on his gun. You've embarrassed my family, made us look weak in front of the whole town. That has consequences. Is that a threat? It's a promise. One way or another, you're leaving, either peacefully with money in your pocket, or what? You'll shoot us? Burn us out? What's the plan here, Daniel? The 4 hired men spread out, forming a loose semicircle. Clara felt her stomach drop. This was it. This was where words stopped and violence started. Rowan raised the rifle slowly, not quite pointing it at anyone, but making the threat clear. I suggest you all get back on your horses. That's 1 rifle against 6 men, Charles Pritchard said. You're good, Hale, but you're not that good. Maybe not, but I can take at least 2 of you before someone gets me, maybe 3. You want to bet which 2 it'll be? The tension stretched. Clara could feel violence hanging in the air like heat before lightning. Then Sheriff Brennan rode up. Everyone turned. The sheriff dismounted slowly, deliberately. He looked tired, angry. What's going on here? Brennan asked. Just having a conversation, Charles Pritchard said smoothly, about Mr. Hale's future. Conversation, right. Brennan looked at the 6 armed men. Funny kind of conversation. Looks more like intimidation to me. Sheriff, this is a private matter. Not anymore it isn't. Not when you've got hired guns on someone's property making threats. Brennan stepped between the two groups. Charles, I've known you 30 years. You're a lot of things, but you're not stupid. You know I can't let this continue. Tom, stay out of this. It's not your concern. It's exactly my concern. It's literally my job. Brennan turned to Rowan. Put the rifle down. Nobody's shooting anyone today. Rowan didn't move. You heard what they said? I heard. But starting a gunfight won't help your case. Brennan looked at him steadily. Trust me. Lower the rifle. After a long moment, Rowan lowered it, but he didn't set it down. Brennan turned back to Pritchard. You're leaving. Now, take your men and go. We have every right to be here. You have the right to conduct legitimate business. You don't have the right to show up with armed men and make threats. That's called intimidation. That's illegal. So unless you want me to arrest all 6 of you for attempted assault, you're leaving. Charles Pritchard's face darkened. You're making a mistake, Tom. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. Brennan's hand moved to his own gun. Go, now. The Pritchards exchanged looks. Finally, Charles nodded. This isn't over. It never is with you. Brennan watched them mount up. But it's over for today. The 6 men rode off. Brennan waited until they were out of sight before turning to Rowan and Clara. You two are going to get yourselves killed. We're just trying to live, Clara said. I know, but Charles Pritchard doesn't care. He's decided you're a problem, and he won't stop until you're gone or dead. Preferably both. What do you suggest we do? Rowan asked. Honestly? I don't know. The law's on your side, but Pritchard's got resources I can't match. Money, influence, men willing to do whatever he pays them for. Brennan rubbed his face. I can't protect you forever. Eventually I won't be there when he comes back. So we're on our own. You've always been on your own. I'm just saying it out loud. Brennan mounted his horse. Be careful. Watch your backs. And if things get bad, if you need help, you send word. I might not be able to do much, but I'll do what I can. Why? Clara asked. Why help us at all? Brennan looked at her for a long moment. Because 30 years ago, I was where you are. Different circumstances, same situation. Someone decided I didn't belong and they tried to run me out. Only difference is I had friends who stood up for me. You two don't have that. So I'm standing up, even if it costs me. He rode off before either of them could respond. Clara and Rowan stood in the yard processing what had just happened, how close they'd come to violence, how thin the line was between surviving and not. We need a better plan, Clara said. We need a miracle. I'm fresh out of those. How about you? Rowan almost smiled. Running low. They went inside, made more coffee, sat at the table trying to figure out what came next. Pritchard's not going to give up, Rowan said. The sheriff was right about that. He'll keep pushing until something breaks. Then we need to push back harder. How? We don't have money. We don't have influence. We have a contract and a judge's ruling. That's it. Clara tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. What if we took this public? Not just in Millerton, but beyond, territorial newspapers. Tell our story. Make it embarrassing for Pritchard to keep attacking us. He doesn't embarrass easy. Everyone embarrasses if the story's bad enough. Powerful man persecutes poor woman and war veteran. Uses money and influence to circumvent the law. Hires armed men to intimidate them. That's a bad look, even for someone like Pritchard. Rowan considered it. It might work, or it might make him angrier. He's already angry. At least this way we're fighting instead of just defending. You realize this could backfire, could bring more attention to my past, to Kansas. I know, but we tell that story on our terms. You were a soldier following orders. You've spent 5 years atoning. You're trying to build a better life now. That's a sympathetic story. Or it's ammunition. Everything's ammunition. We just have to make our ammunition count more than theirs. Clara leaned forward. What do you think? Take the fight to them for once? Rowan stared at the table for a long time. Then he nodded. All right, let's do it. How do we start? We find a journalist, someone who will listen, someone who needs a story. I might know someone. Guy named Patterson, used to report on the war, moved out here after, works for the territorial paper now. Rowan stood up. He might be interested, or he might think we're crazy. Only one way to find out. They spent the next 2 days drafting their story. Clara wrote most of it. She had a way with words that Rowan didn't. She laid out the facts cleanly. Clara's arrival, the employment arrangement, the town's hostility, the legal battles, the intimidation, the fires, the threats. She included Rowan's background without hiding from it, and she made it clear that this wasn't just about them. It was about what happened when powerful people decided someone didn't deserve basic dignity. When they finished, Rowan read it over. This is good. Really good. Think Patterson will publish it? If he's still the man I remember, yes. He always hated bullies, and Pritchard's a bully with money. When do we contact him? Tomorrow. I'll ride to the territorial capital. It's 2 days there and back. You'll be alone here. I can handle it. Can you? If Pritchard comes back while I'm gone, then I'll deal with it. I'm not helpless, Rowan. I've survived worse than Charles Pritchard. He looked at her, something proud and worried in his expression. I know you have. Doesn't mean I have to like leaving you alone. I'll be fine. Go, get our story out there. Make Pritchard regret ever hearing my name. Rowan left the next morning, saddlebag full of supplies and the carefully written pages of their story. Clara stood in the yard watching him ride away until he disappeared over the horizon. Then she went back to work. The ranch felt different without him, quieter, more exposed. Clara found herself checking the horizon constantly, expecting riders. But none came. The first day passed uneventfully. She fed the animals, mended fence, hauled water. Normal work. The kind of work that made her feel solid, useful, real. The second day was harder. The isolation pressed in. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a person. She kept the rifle close, loaded and ready. That night, she barely slept. Lay on the cot with her boots on, listening to the house settle and the wind howl and the distant howls of coyotes. Morning came gray and uncertain. Clara made coffee, ate bread that was going stale, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. That's when she saw the smoke. Not from the barn this time. From the town. A column of black smoke rising into the sky. Clara stood in the yard, staring. Something was burning. Something big. Should she go check? Should she stay here? What if it was a trap? But what if people needed help? She made a decision. Saddled one of the horses, grabbed the rifle, and rode toward town. The closer she got, the thicker the smoke became. She could smell it now. Wood, chemicals, something acrid that burned her lungs. When she reached the edge of Millerton, she saw what was burning. The bank. Charles Pritchard's bank. Fire was pouring out of the windows. People were running, shouting, trying to form a bucket line. Someone was screaming about money inside, about records burning. Clara dismounted, tied her horse, and ran toward the chaos. "Get back!" someone shouted at her. "It's not safe." "Where's Pritchard?" Clara yelled back. "Inside. He went inside to get the lockbox." Without thinking, Clara ran toward the burning building. Someone grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? You'll die in there." Clara shook them off and kept going. The heat hit her like a wall. Smoke made it impossible to see more than a few feet. She pulled her shirt over her nose and mouth, pushed forward. "Pritchard!" she shouted. "Where are you?" A crash from deeper inside, then coughing. Clara followed the sound. She found him in what used to be his office. Charles Pritchard was on the ground, coughing violently, trying to drag a metal lockbox toward the door. Flames danced across the ceiling. The room was collapsing. Clara ran to him, grabbed his arm. "Leave it! We have to go now!" He tried to fight her, tried to hold on to the box. She slapped it out of his hands. "Now!" She dragged him toward the door. He was heavy, disoriented. The smoke was worse. Clara's lungs screamed. Her eyes watered. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe. They stumbled out of the building just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. People rushed forward, pulling them away from the fire. Someone threw water on them. Someone else was yelling for a doctor. Clara collapsed on the ground, coughing so hard she thought her ribs would crack. Her throat was raw. Her lungs burned. When she could finally breathe again, she looked up. Charles Pritchard was sitting a few feet away, staring at her. His face was black with soot. His eyes were wide with something that might have been shock or might have been understanding. "You," he said hoarsely. "You saved me." Clara coughed again, spat black phlegm. "Yeah, stupid, right? Why?" "Because you were dying. And I'm not the kind of person who lets people die. Even people who hate me." Pritchard stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked away. The bank burned for hours. By the time they got it under control, there was nothing left but a shell. Everything inside was gone. Money, records, years of accumulated wealth turned to ash. Clara sat on the steps of the general store, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, watching the aftermath. People were talking, speculating about how it started, who was to blame. Daniel Pritchard approached her. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. "My father wants to see you," he said finally. "Tell him I'm not interested." "Please, just hear him out." Against her better judgment, Clara followed him. Charles Pritchard was sitting on the edge of a wagon, being tended by the town doctor. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. When he saw Clara, he waved the doctor away. "Give us a minute." The doctor left. Daniel stayed close, protective. "You should have let me die in there," Pritchard said. "Probably." "Why didn't you?" Clara sat down on the wagon beside him. Every muscle in her body ached. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed glass. "Because I'm tired of people dying for stupid reasons, and revenge isn't a good enough reason." Pritchard was quiet for a long time. "I've spent the last 3 months trying to destroy you, trying to drive you out of this territory, and you just saved my life." "Don't read too much into it. I would have done it for anyone." "No, you wouldn't have. Most people would have watched me burn." He looked at her. "I was wrong about you." "Yeah, you were. I thought you were like everyone else who comes out here with nothing, looking for an easy way, ready to take advantage. I didn't see that you were just trying to survive." "Survival looks like a threat to people who've never had to fight for it." Pritchard nodded slowly. "My father built this bank from nothing. He taught me that weakness was failure, that you had to be strong, had to be feared, or people would take everything from you." He gestured at the smoking ruins. "I've been strong. I've been feared. And look where it got me." Clara didn't say anything. Let him work through whatever he was working through. "The fire started in the back office," Pritchard continued. "Someone deliberately set it, used lamp oil, made sure it would spread fast." He looked at her. "Any idea who might want to burn down my bank? About half the territory?" "Fair." He almost smiled. "But I think it was meant to send me a message. Someone telling me that I'm not untouchable, that all my money and power can go up in smoke just like anything else." "You think it was us?" "No. If you wanted to hurt me, you would have let me die in there." He stood up slowly, painfully. "I'm calling off the lawyers, stopping the appeals. You can stay. You and Hale both." Clara stared at him. "Why?" "Because you were right. I've been persecuting you for existing, and that makes me no better than the people who drove my father out of Boston 50 years ago." He looked at the burned bank. "Maybe it's time I remembered what it's like to lose everything. Might make me a better man." "I'm not holding my breath." "Smart." He started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I let my pride turn me into something I'm not proud of. And I'm going to do better. We'll see." He nodded once and walked away, leaning on his son. Clara sat on the wagon, trying to process what had just happened. She'd saved Charles Pritchard's life. And he'd called off his war against them. She should feel victorious, relieved. Instead, she just felt exhausted. She stayed in town long enough to make sure the fire was truly out, then rode back to the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. When she reached the house, Rowan was there, waiting. He ran to her when he saw her, took in her soot-covered clothes and singed hair. "What happened?" Clara dismounted slowly. "The bank burned. Pritchard was inside. I got him out." Rowan stared at her. "You did what?" "I saved his life. I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot. You're He trailed off, then pulled her into a fierce hug. "You could have died." "Didn't, though." "Clara, I know. I'm sorry. I couldn't let him die, even after everything. Rowan pulled back, looked at her. What did he say? He's calling off the lawyers, stopping the appeals. We can stay. You're serious? Completely. They stood in the yard as the sun disappeared and stars began to appear. Clara felt something shift. Not victory, not relief, just possibility. The sense that maybe, finally, they could stop fighting and start living. Patterson published the story, Rowan said. It'll be in tomorrow's paper, but I guess we don't need it now. We might, in case Pritchard changes his mind. Clara leaned against him, suddenly aware of how tired she was. Is it over? Is it actually over? I don't know, but for tonight, let's pretend it is. They went inside. Clara washed off the soot and smoke while Rowan made dinner. They ate in comfortable silence, both too exhausted to talk. That night, Clara lay on her cot and realized something. She was home. Not just occupying space, not just surviving, actually home, and that was worth fighting for, even if the fight never really ended. The newspaper arrived 3 days later. Claire was mending fence when she saw the writer coming, holding up a folded paper like a flag. She set down her tools and walked to meet him at the property line. Special delivery, the writer said, grinning. Thought you'd want to see this right away. Clara took the paper. The headline spread across the front page in bold letters. War veteran and working woman stand against corruption in Millerton. Below it, a smaller subheading, Charles Pritchard's campaign of intimidation exposed. She scanned the article. Patterson had used everything they'd given him and more. He'd interviewed Sheriff Brennan, quoted Judge Garrett's ruling, even included testimony from people in town who'd witnessed the harassment. And he'd framed it exactly the way Clara had hoped. Not as a story about two outcasts, but as a story about power, abuse, and the people who refused to be crushed by it. It's causing quite a stir in the capital, the writer said. Everyone's talking about it. Some folks are calling for an investigation into Pritchard's business practices. Others are saying you two are heroes. He leaned forward in his saddle. For what it's worth, I think you did good. Standing up like that. Thanks, Clara said, still reading. Also heard what you did at the fire, saving Pritchard after everything he put you through. The writer shook his head. That takes something special. Clara looked up. It was just the right thing to do. Most people don't do the right thing when it costs them. That's what makes it special. He tipped his hat. Good luck to you both. He rode off. Clara walked back to the house, reading the article again. Rowan was inside, working on repairing a broken chair leg. She handed him the paper without a word. He read it slowly, carefully. When he finished, he set it down on the table. This is going to change things, he said. Good or bad? Both, probably. Some people will support us. Others will hate us for embarrassing Pritchard publicly. Either way, we're not invisible anymore. Clara sat across from him. Is that what you wanted, to not be invisible? I don't know what I wanted. 5 years ago, I wanted to disappear. Now, he looked at her. Now I want to be seen, but only by people who matter, and you matter. Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. You matter too, even when you're being difficult, especially when I'm being difficult. They sat in comfortable silence, the newspaper between them like proof that their story existed beyond this ranch, beyond Millerton, beyond the small world they'd been fighting for. That afternoon, more visitors came, not hostile ones this time. A woman from 2 ranches over brought bread and preserves, thanked Clara for standing up to Pritchard. A farmer who'd lost his land to the bank years ago shook Rowan's hand, told him it was about time someone put Charles in his place. An older couple who ran a small general store on the outskirts of town offered to extend them credit if they needed supplies. People are taking sides, Rowan observed after the 4th visitor left. The article forced them to pick. Some of them were always on our side. They just couldn't say it before. And the ones who weren't? They'll come around eventually, or they won't. Either way, we're still here. But the visitors who mattered most came 3 days after the article ran. Sheriff Brennan rode up in the morning with 2 people Clara had never seen before. A man in a suit and a woman carrying a leather satchel. Rowan Clara, Brennan said, dismounting. This is Marcus Walsh from the Territorial Attorney's Office. and Helen Chen from the land office. They need to talk to you both. Clara and Rowan exchanged glances. This could be good or very, very bad. They invited everyone inside. Clara made coffee while the visitors settled around the table. Walsh spoke first. We've been reviewing Charles Pritchard's business practices following the publication of your story. What we've found is concerning. Concerning how? Rowan asked. Concerning as in potentially criminal. Fraudulent land deals, intimidation tactics, bribing local officials. The bank fire destroyed a lot of evidence, but we've been able to reconstruct some of it through other sources. Walsh pulled papers from his briefcase. Which brings us to why we're here. We need your testimony, official statements about everything that happened, every threat, every attempted intimidation, every illegal action you witnessed. You're building a case against him, Clara said. We're building several cases, but we need cooperation from the people he targeted, people like you. Helen Chen spoke up, her voice gentler than Walsh's. We also need to address some irregularities we found regarding land titles in this area. Mr. Hail your ranch. The deed has some problems. Problems that Charles Pritchard likely created intentionally to give himself leverage over you. Rowan's face went hard. What kind of problems? Boundary disputes? Water rights questions? Survey discrepancies? On paper, it looks like you might be squatting on land that doesn't fully belong to you. In reality, someone manipulated the records to make it look that way. Pritchard? Almost certainly. But we can fix it. If you're willing to work with us, we can clear your title, secure your water rights, and make sure no one can challenge your ownership again. Clara leaned forward. What do you need from us? Over the next hour, they laid it all out. Statements about the fires, the threats, the hired men, the courthouse intimidation, documentation of every interaction with Pritchard and his people, names of witnesses who might testify. It was thorough, exhausting, and absolutely necessary. When Walsh and Chen finally left, Clara felt drained. They'd relived every terrible moment of the past few months, put it all down on paper, made it official. You think it'll stick? She asked Rowan. Or will Pritchard's lawyers get him out of it? I don't know. Men like him usually find a way to survive. Rowan poured himself more coffee. But at least we're not fighting alone anymore. That's something. Sheriff Brennan stayed behind after the others left. He looked uncomfortable, like he had something to say but didn't know how. Out with it, Tom, Rowan said. The town's splitting apart. Half the people think you're heroes. The other half think you're troublemakers who destroyed an important man's business. There have been fights in the saloon, families not speaking to each other. It's getting ugly. That's not our fault, Clara said. I know, but it's still happening. Brennan sighed. I'm not asking you to leave or apologize or anything like that. I just wanted you to know what you're walking into if you come back to town. We'll handle it. I know you will. Just be careful. People are angry and scared and looking for someone to blame, and you two are convenient targets. After Brennan left, Clara walked out to the porch. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. The land stretched out in all directions, beautiful and harsh, and hers. Theirs. Rowan joined her. You ever wonder if we made things worse? If staying and fighting just hurt more people? Clara thought about it. Maybe, but leaving would have hurt us, and I'm tired of people hurting themselves to make others comfortable. Even if it causes problems for the town? The town already had problems. We just forced everyone to look at them. She glanced at him. You can't build something real on a foundation of pretending. Sooner or later, it all collapses. We just sped up the timeline. That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one. They stood together, watching the sun disappear. Clara felt Rowan's hand find hers, fingers lacing together. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. It meant they were in this together. It meant they'd chosen each other, despite everything. I need to tell you something, Rowan said quietly. What? The ranch. Even with the title cleared, it's barely profitable. I've got debts I can't pay, equipment that needs replacing, repairs that'll cost more than I have. I'm one bad season away from losing everything. Clara squeezed his hand. So we work harder, find ways to make it profitable. I can take in sewing work. You can sell horses. We'll figure it out. That's not what I'm saying. He turned to face her. I'm saying this isn't the life you deserve. You should have security, Comfort, a future that's not just survival. I don't want comfort. I want purpose. I want to build something that matters. Even if it's hard? Especially if it's hard. Easy things don't mean anything. She met his eyes. I'm not here because I have nowhere else to go. I'm here because this is where I choose to be, with you, building this. Rowan studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He pulled her into a kiss. It was unexpected, urgent, full of everything they'd been holding back. Clara kissed him back, hands fisting in his shirt, feeling like she was falling and being caught at the same time. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Clara went very still. What? Marry me. Not because of contracts or legal protection or anything practical. Marry me because I want to build this life with you. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because you're the first person in 5 years who made me want to be better than my worst moments. Rowan, I know it's fast. I know we're in the middle of everything, but I also know that life doesn't wait for perfect timing, and I don't want to wait anymore. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Yes. Yes? Yes, you stubborn fool. I'll marry you. He kissed her again, and this time it was softer, sweeter, full of promise instead of urgency. They stayed on the porch until full dark, holding each other, making quiet promises about the future they'd build together. The next morning, they rode into town together. Clara wore her best dress, which still wasn't very impressive. Rowan wore his suit. They went straight to the courthouse, where Judge Garrett happened to be hearing cases. They waited until he had a recess, then approached. Miss Vance, Mr. Hale, the judge said, surprised. What can I do for you? We'd like to get married, Rowan said. Today, if possible. The judge raised his eyebrows. That's sudden. We've been through enough waiting, Clara said. We'd like to do this now. Judge Garrett studied them both, then nodded slowly. All right, I can perform the ceremony if you can find 2 witnesses. Sheriff Brennan agreed to be one witness. They found the court clerk to be the other. The ceremony was brief, simple, without any pretense or decoration. Judge Garrett read the legal words. Clara and Rowan spoke their vows, promising to stand together, to build together, to face whatever came together. When it was done, the judge signed the certificate. Well, congratulations. You're married. Clara looked at the paper with their names on it. Clara Hale. It looked strange and right at the same time. They walked out of the courthouse into bright morning sun. A small crowd had gathered. Word had spread fast. Some people looked pleased. Others looked scandalized. Clara didn't care about either reaction. They were halfway to their horses when Charles Pritchard stepped out of the crowd. Clara's hand went to Rowan's arm, but Pritchard didn't look hostile. He looked tired, defeated. Congratulations, Pritchard said quietly. Thank you, Clara replied, wary. I mean it. I heard what you did just now. Getting married despite everything, despite me. He looked at the ground. I want to apologize, properly, for everything I did to try to drive you away, for the harassment, the intimidation, the attempts to burn you out. All of it. Why now? Rowan asked. Because the territorial attorney showed me the evidence they've compiled. Because I'm looking at criminal charges and the loss of everything I've built. Because my son told me this morning that he's ashamed of what I've become. Pritchard's voice cracked. I spent so much time trying to maintain control that I lost sight of what matters, and I'm paying for it now. Clara didn't know what to say. This was the man who'd made their lives hell for months, who'd tried to erase her, who'd nearly succeeded. But he was also the man she'd pulled from a burning building. I don't forgive you, she said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was wrong, cruel. You tried to destroy us because you couldn't accept that we had a right to exist. I know. But I also don't hate you. Hate takes energy I don't have, so I'll accept your apology, and I'll hope you actually mean it. Pritchard nodded. I do, for what it's worth. He walked away, shoulders hunched, looking smaller than Clara had ever seen him. Daniel Pritchard approached next. He looked embarrassed, ashamed. I'm sorry too, he said. I went along with everything my father did. I told myself I was being loyal, but really I was just being a coward. You deserved better." "Yes," Clara said. "We did. Is there anything I can do to make it right?" Clara thought about it. "Stop following in your father's footsteps. Be better than him. That's all." Daniel nodded and left. More people approached after that. Some to congratulate, some to apologize, some just to see the woman who'd stood up to the most powerful man in town and won. Clara and Rowan accepted it all with grace, then mounted their horses and rode home. Home. That's what it was now. Not just a place to survive, but a place to live. Over the next weeks, things changed slowly. The territorial attorney's investigation continued. Charles Pritchard was charged with fraud, intimidation, and bribery. His lawyers managed to negotiate down some of the charges, but he lost the bank, lost much of his wealth, lost his standing in the community. It wasn't total destruction, but it was justice of a kind. The town itself shifted. New businesses opened, ones not controlled by Pritchard money. People who'd been silent started speaking up about other injustices, other abuses of power. It was messy and uncomfortable and absolutely necessary. Clara and Rowan's ranch became something of a symbol. People pointed to it as proof that you could stand against corruption and survive. Young women showed up asking Clara how she'd done it, how she'd found the courage to fight. Clara told them the truth. She hadn't been brave, she'd been desperate. But desperation could look like courage if you didn't give up. Rowan started teaching some of the town's young men how to work with horses. He didn't talk about Kansas much, but when he did, he was honest. He told them about following orders that were wrong, about living with guilt, about trying to be better than your worst moments. Some of the young men listened, some didn't, but at least he was trying. Clara took in sewing work like she'd planned. Word spread that she was skilled, reliable, and didn't gossip. Soon she had more work than she could handle. She hired 2 other women to help, women who needed employment and had nowhere else to turn. Together, they built something small but solid. The ranch itself improved slowly. They fixed the barn properly, replaced old fencing, dug a better well. It was hard work, endless work, but it was theirs. Every improvement felt like a victory. 6 months after the wedding, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Rowan one evening while they were sitting on the porch, watching stars appear. He went very quiet, then pulled her close. "You scared?" he asked. "Terrified." "Me too." "Good. At least we're terrified together." They sat in silence, imagining a future that included a child. A future that had seemed impossible just a year ago. "What if I'm a terrible father?" Rowan asked quietly. "What if I'm a terrible mother?" "Then we'll both be terrible together, and the kid will turn out fine anyway." Clara laughed. "That's terrible logic." But probably true. The baby, a girl, was born in the spring. They named her Sarah after Rowan's mother. She was small, loud, and completely perfect in the way newborns are. Clara held her daughter and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The false accusation, the desperate journey, the cold reception, the fights, the fires, the fear. And somehow from all that pain and struggle, this tiny life had emerged. This perfect, innocent thing that had no idea what her parents had been through to create a space where she could exist. "What are we going to tell her?" Clara asked Rowan. "When she's old enough to ask where we came from?" Rowan looked at his daughter's small face. "The truth. That we were both broken people who found each other when no one else wanted us. That we fought for the right to exist and build something worth having. That love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stand together when everything else falls apart." That's a heavy story for a kid. She'll be able to handle it. She's got your strength and my stubbornness. That's a terrifying combination. Yeah, I can't wait to see what she does with it. Over the years, the story of Clara and Rowan became part of Millerton's history. Not the sanitized version where everything worked out neatly, but the real version. The version where people were complicated and justice was messy, and fighting for your rights didn't guarantee happiness, just the opportunity to pursue it. Charles Pritchard eventually rebuilt some of his reputation. He never regained his former power, but he became known as someone who'd learned from his mistakes. He and Clara maintained a distant, complicated respect for each other. Not friendship, but acknowledgement that people could change if they chose to. Judge Garrett retired, but not before writing an opinion piece about the case. He talked about how law was meant to protect the vulnerable, not just serve the powerful. How justice required courage from everyone, judges, citizens, even outcasts willing to stand up for themselves. Sheriff Brennan served another 10 years before retiring. He told anyone who'd listen that Clara and Rowan had taught him that doing the right thing didn't always mean following the easy path. The ranch itself became modestly successful, never wealthy, but stable. A place where people knew they could find honest work, fair treatment, and a second chance if they needed one. Clara and Rowan employed people who reminded them of themselves, people with rough pasts, people who'd been written off, people who just needed someone to take a chance on them. Sarah grew up strong, opinionated, and utterly unimpressed by authority. She learned to ride before she could read, learned to argue before she learned to compromise. When she was 12, she asked her mother about the rumors she'd heard. "Is it true you were called a vagrant? That Grandpa Pritchard tried to run you out of town?" Clara was mending a shirt at the kitchen table. She set down her needle. "It's true." "But you weren't a vagrant. You were working." "I was working, but I didn't have the right connections or the right background. So some people decided I didn't belong." "That's not fair." "No, it's not." Sarah thought about this. "What did you do?" "I refused to leave. I stood up for myself. I fought back. And it worked? Eventually, after a lot of pain and struggle and nights when I thought I couldn't keep going." "But you did keep going." "Yes." "Why?" Clara looked at her daughter, this fierce, curious person who existed because two broken people had refused to give up. "Because giving up meant letting people tell me I didn't matter, and I knew I mattered, even when no one else did, even when it would have been easier to believe them." Sarah nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Rowan came in from outside, dusty and tired. He kissed Clara's head, ruffled Sarah's hair. The three of them sat together in the kitchen of the house they'd fought to keep, in the life they'd fought to build. It wasn't perfect. The ranch still struggled sometimes. Money was always tight. The town still had people who looked at them sideways, who remembered the scandal and judged them for it. Rowan still had nightmares about Kansas. Clara still tensed when powerful men spoke to her. But they had each other. They had their daughter. They had a place in the world that no one could take away because they'd claimed it themselves, on their own terms. And that was enough. More than enough. One evening, years later, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset. She was older now, gray threading through her hair, lines around her eyes. Rowan stood beside her, his hair more silver than dark, his back a little bent from years of hard work. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Fighting so hard for this?" Clara thought about the question, thought about all the easier paths she could have taken, all the times she could have given up, moved on, accepted that she didn't belong. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. Because if I'd run, I would have spent my whole life running, always wondering if I could have stood my ground, always believing what they said about me. And now? Now I know who I am. I know what I'm worth, and no one can take that from me." She looked at him. "What about you? Ever wish you'd sold the ranch, taken Pritchard's money, started over somewhere easier?" Rowan smiled. "Not once, because easy wouldn't have given me you, or Sarah, or any of this." He gestured at the ranch, the land, the life they'd built. "Hard gave me everything that matters." They stood together as the light faded and stars emerged. From inside the house, they could hear Sarah singing while she worked on dinner. The sound of home. The sound of a life earned through struggle and sweat and refusing to accept what other people said was possible. "We did good," Clara said quietly. "Yeah," Rowan agreed. "We did." And they had. Not by being perfect, not by winning every fight, not by changing everyone's minds, but by standing their ground, by choosing each other, by building something real in a world that tried to erase them. They'd proven that worth wasn't determined by birth or money or social standing. That dignity wasn't a gift from the powerful, but a right claimed by the powerless. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply refuse to disappear. The frontier had tried to break them. The town had tried to cast them out. The system had tried to grind them down, and they'd survived it all. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they were stubborn, because they believed they deserved to exist, even when everyone else said they didn't, because they knew that the only way to change an unjust world was to refuse to accept its injustice. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magical transformation, no villain completely defeated, no happily ever after in the traditional sense. But there was something better. There was reality. Messy, complicated, difficult reality where two broken people found each other and built a life that mattered. Where justice was imperfect, but still worth fighting for. Where love wasn't romance, but partnership, the daily choice to stand together against whatever came. And in the end, that was enough. Clara Vance, now Clara Hale, had arrived at a remote ranch with nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. The woman no one wanted. And she'd become the woman no one could ignore. The woman who'd stood up to power and survived. The woman who'd proven that being unwanted didn't mean being worthless. Rowan had been a ghost, haunted by his past, convinced he didn't deserve a second chance. And he'd become a man who gave second chances to everyone who needed them, who proved that guilt could be transformed into action, shame into strength. Together, they'd rewritten the rules. Not for everyone, not forever, but enough. Enough to matter, enough to make a difference. As the last light faded from the sky, Clara turned to Rowan. Thank you. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible, for standing beside me when everyone else turned away, for choosing me. Rowan pulled her close. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop hiding, for making me believe I could be more than my worst moment, for choosing me back. They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other at the end of the world and built something worth having. The ranch lights glowed warm in the distance. Inside, their daughter was making dinner, humming to herself, completely unaware that her mere existence was a victory her parents had fought years to achieve. And somewhere, in towns and territories beyond Millerton, other people were fighting their own battles, standing their ground, refusing to disappear, claiming their right to exist. Maybe some of them would think of Clara and Rowan's story. Maybe it would give them courage. Or maybe they'd find their own courage, in their own way, on their own terms. Either way, the fight would continue, because that's what living meant, fighting for the right to live, on your own terms, in your own way, regardless of who said you couldn't. Clara and Rowan had learned that lesson the hard way, and they'd never forget it. The frontier didn't care who survived and who didn't, but Clara and Rowan cared, and that made all the difference. They walked inside together, leaving the darkness behind, stepping into the warm light of the home they'd built, a home that said, "We are here. We matter. We belong." And no one, not the powerful, not the righteous, not the whole weight of society, could ever take that away, because they'd claimed it themselves, and that was the only claim that truly mattered.